The dim glow of city lights flickered through the tinted windows of the private lounge, casting long shadows across the faces of men who had never known hunger, desperation, or failure. Arjun leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of whiskey, his smirk widening as his so-called friends erupted in laughter. Marry a homeless woman? He raised an eyebrow, pretending to consider the ridiculous bet. You wouldn't dare, one of them taunted. You might be the richest man in the city, but even you have limits. Arjun chuckled. Limits? That word meant nothing to him. He had built his empire on risk, on defying expectations, on proving everyone wrong. This was just another game. Fine, he said, setting his glass down with a soft clink. I'll do it. I'll marry the first homeless woman I see. And I'll even bring her to the wedding tonight. The room exploded with cheers and disbelieving laughter. Arjun wasn't worried. It was a bet, nothing more. By morning, he would annul the marriage, and his life would go back to normal. Or so he thought. An hour later the limousine rolled to a stop near an abandoned alley. The driver hesitated. Sir, are you sure? Open the door, Arjun interrupted, stepping out into the cool night. A few feet away, a woman sat on the sidewalk, wrapped in a tattered coat, her face hidden beneath a hood. Unlike the others in the alley, she didn't beg, didn't call out to passing strangers. She just sat there, silent, unmoving, as if waiting for something. Perfect. Arjun approached her. I have a proposition for you. She looked up slowly, and for a moment, he felt something strange, a flicker of hesitation, a shiver of uncertainty. Her eyes weren't desperate, weren't pleading. They were calm, as if she had already figured out how this conversation would end. Go on, she said, her voice soft but firm. I need a wife. Just for one night. No catch, no expectations. In exchange, you'll get a place to stay, food, money. A pause. All right, she said, standing up. No questions, no hesitation. Arjun blinked. He hadn't expected it to be this easy. You're not even going to ask why? He asked, studying her face. She smiled, a knowing smile that sent a strange unease through him. No. I already know. A chill ran down his spine. The ceremony was nothing more than a charade, an expensive suit, a designer wedding dress borrowed last minute, and a room full of people who were only there for the spectacle. She didn't seem nervous. She didn't even flinch when he slid the ring onto her finger. But when the vows were said and the night arrived, Arjun finally started to sense something was wrong. Because when he turned to face his new wife in their private suite, she wasn't there. And then, a whisper, soft, eerie, right by his ear. You should have chosen someone else. His breath caught. He spun around. She was standing in the corner of the room, watching him, her eyes too knowing, too deep, as if she could see straight through his soul. Something was very, very wrong. Arjun stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest. His wife, if he could even call her that, stood in the dimly lit corner of the room, watching him. She hadn't made a sound when she moved. No footsteps, no rustling of fabric. Just the eerie stillness of a person who didn't belong. You, he cleared his throat, forcing a chuckle. You scared me. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. Then, she smiled. Not a warm smile. Not one of amusement. But something deeper, more knowing. You expected me to be different, didn't you? She said softly. Arjun swallowed. He had expected a lot of things. Maybe she'd be overwhelmed, nervous, desperate to please him for the wealth and luxury she had suddenly gained. Maybe she'd be an opportunist, playing the long game to get more out of this ridiculous marriage. But not this. Not a woman who moved like a shadow and looked at him as if she already knew the ending to a story he had only just begun. You never even asked for my name, she continued, her voice smooth, almost amused. Arjun frowned. Does it matter? We both know this isn't real. She stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, until she stood just inches away from him. He caught the faintest scent of something familiar but unplaceable, like the air before a thunderstorm. It's Aelith, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And for the record, I never needed a name. Arjun's pulse quickened. What kind of answer was that? Trying to regain control, he forced himself to relax, stepping away and pouring himself a drink. All right, Aelith. This is all a bit dramatic, don't you think? We'll sign the annulment papers tomorrow. You'll have your money, and I'll win my bet. No need to act like this is something more than what it is. She didn't react. She didn't move. Just watched him with those unervingly steady eyes. And then, she said something that made his stomach twist. You think this was your idea? The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the floor. A woman with no past. Arjun didn't sleep that night. He had been with countless women before, models, actresses, socialites, but none of them had made him feel uneasy. There was something off about Aelith. Maybe it was the way she spoke in riddles. Or how she seemed too calm, too accepting of a situation that should have left her disoriented and overwhelmed. Or maybe it was the fact that she didn't react like someone whose life had just changed overnight. The next morning, he decided to get some answers. The first clue after Aelith left for a walk, because apparently, she did what she wanted, Arjun made some calls. First, his assistant. Find out everything you can about Aelith. Where she came from, who she is, her background, everything. There was a pause on the line. Sir. Aelith who? Arjun exhaled sharply. My wife. I know, but there's nothing here. No birth records, no identification, no history. It's like she doesn't exist. Arjun's grip tightened on the phone. That wasn't possible. Everyone had a past. Everyone. The test that night, Arjun decided to push her. They sat across from each other in the grand dining hall of his penthouse, the air thick with unspoken words. Aelith ate silently, each movement controlled, precise, like someone who had lived in discipline, not on the streets. You're not what you seem, he said finally. She looked up, her expression unreadable. Neither are you. A flicker of irritation flared in him. You're avoiding the question. And you're afraid of the answer. He clenched his jaw. Enough games. Fine. Let's make this easy. If you were truly homeless, you must have begged for food, right? Tell me the name of the last restaurant that turned you away. Aelith smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. You already know I didn't. Something cold slithered down his spine. He had picked her from the streets. A beggar. A woman with nothing. But she had never begged. Never asked for anything. And yet, somehow, he was the one who felt like he had been chosen. Arjun lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse suite. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls, glowing with the wealth and power he had built for himself. And yet, for the first time in his life, he felt powerless. Aelith. Who was she? She had no past, no records, no history. A homeless woman who didn't beg, didn't hesitate, and most disturbingly, didn't seem surprised by anything. And then there was that look in her eyes, the calm confidence of someone who had already won a game he didn't even know he was playing. Arjun was done waiting for answers. The hidden fortune. The next morning, as Aelith left the penthouse for one of her silent, unexplained walks, Arjun moved quickly. He had already contacted a private investigator, and now, it was time to search for himself. He entered her temporary guest room, his fingers tightening into a fist as he looked around. Everything was too neat. Too orderly for someone who had supposedly spent years surviving on the streets. He checked the drawers. Empty. The closet. Empty. As if she hadn't brought anything with her at all. But then, he saw it. A small, locked wooden box on the nightstand. His instincts screamed at him, this was it. The first real clue. With quick precision, he forced the lock open with a knife, heart pounding as he lifted the lid. Inside, there were 3 things. A small folded note. A single old key, one that didn't match any door in his penthouse. And a bank card. A platinum black bank card. His breath hitched. Not just any card, one only issued to people with accounts holding upwards of $50 million. A homeless woman with millions of dollars? His hands trembled as he picked up the note. It read, in neat, elegant handwriting, "You should have trusted your first instinct. You were right, I'm not who you think I am. But it's too late now. The door has already been opened." His pulse slammed against his ribs. The door? What door? He turned the key over in his palm. His mind raced through possibilities. He had seen a lot of strange things in his life. Deals made in secret, fortunes built overnight, power shifting hands in a matter of hours. But this was different. This was something he didn't understand. He was about to call his investigator when the door behind him creaked open. He turned slowly. Alith was standing there. Not angry. Not shocked. Just, waiting. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said, almost regretfully. Arjun stood, gripping the note. "Who the hell are you?" She sighed. "You keep asking the wrong question, Arjun." His jaw clenched. "Then what's the right question?" She took a step forward, eyes gleaming with something unreadable. "Why did I let you marry me?" The uneasy truce. Arjun had all the power in the world. Wealth, influence, control. But in this moment, he felt like a man out of his depth. Alith wasn't reacting the way any normal woman would. There was no panic, no anger, no scrambling to explain. She just stood there. Like she had been waiting for him to figure this out. "I could have you investigated," Arjun said, testing her reaction. "Dragged into the open. Whatever you're hiding, you won't," Alith cut him off smoothly. Arjun's temper flared. "And why is that?" Alith leaned in just slightly, her voice a whisper. "Because deep down, you don't want to know the truth." Something about the way she said it made his chest tighten. Because, she was right. For the first time in his life, he was afraid of the answer. That night Arjun lay awake again, turning the key over in his fingers. Was it a test? A game? A warning? His entire life had been built on calculated risks. He had gambled with money, with business, with power. But this was different. This was personal. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he had already lost. Arjun wasn't a man who feared the unknown. He had built his empire by making ruthless decisions, by uncovering secrets and using them to his advantage. But as he sat in his dimly lit study, staring at the key and the note in his hands, he felt something unfamiliar creeping into his chest. Doubt. Fear. Alith had millions of dollars tucked away in a secret account. A woman who had been living on the streets, or at least pretending to. She had let him marry her with zero hesitation, and now, she was daring him to question her. He wasn't used to this feeling. He was supposed to be in control. But he wasn't. Not anymore. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was his private investigator. Arjun hesitated, then picked up. "Tell me you found something." There was a long pause on the other end. Then, the investigator spoke, his voice lower than usual. "Sir. I think you should drop this." Arjun stiffened. Excuse me? I don't know who she really is, but whoever she is, someone has gone through great lengths to erase her past. No birth certificate, no medical records, no employment history. It's like she just appeared. That doesn't happen unless someone wants it that way. Arjun's fingers tightened around the phone. Keep digging, he said, his voice sharp. Find out everything you can. The investigator hesitated again. I'll try. But, be careful, sir. Some things are buried for a reason. The line went dead. Arjun exhaled, tension coiling in his chest. He wasn't the kind of man who backed down from a challenge. And if Aelith thought she could outplay him, she was wrong. Confrontation that night, he found Aelith standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city skyline. The glow of the streetlights cast a faint shimmer over her silhouette, making her seem even more untouchable. You knew I'd look into you, he said, stepping closer. Aelith didn't turn around. Of course. Then why did you let me? She finally turned, her expression unreadable. Because I needed to see how far you'd go. Arjun clenched his jaw. You were declared dead years ago. A flicker of something passed through her eyes, amusement? Sadness? People believe what they're told to believe. Arjun stepped closer, searching her face. Who told them you were dead? Aelith didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the same wooden key he had found in her room. You still have the note, don't you? She asked softly. Arjun hesitated. Yes. Then you already know, she murmured. The door has already been opened. A sharp chill ran down his spine. What did that mean? Aelith walked past him, stopping only briefly to whisper, You're not in control of this, Arjun. You never were. And then she was gone. A hidden message. Arjun didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at his desk, staring at the note. He ran his fingers over the ink, his mind replaying Aelith's words. The door has already been opened. A sharp chill ran down his spine. What did that mean? Aelith walked past him, stopping only briefly to whisper, You're not in control of this, Arjun. You never were. And then she was gone. A hidden message. Arjun didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at his desk, staring at the note. He ran his fingers over the ink, his mind replaying Aelith's words. The door has already been opened. There had to be more to it. A clue. A riddle. Something. Then, on impulse, he held the note up against the light. His breath caught. There was something faintly imprinted beneath the visible text, words that had been written, then carefully erased. He grabbed a pencil and lightly rubbed it over the paper. Slowly, hidden letters began to appear. A single phrase. Meet me where it all began. Arjun's pulse thundered in his ears. Where it all began? Was it a place? A time? Or was this something bigger, something he wasn't ready to face? A secret that could destroy everything. Arjun sat motionless in his study, the note still trembling in his grip. Meet me where it all began. He knew exactly what it meant. There was only one place in his past that held any significance. A place he had tried to forget. And Aelith, a woman who shouldn't even exist, knew about it. The journey to the past. The next morning, Arjun boarded his private jet, destination locked. Raventon Orphanage. A place buried deep in the outskirts of the city. His childhood home. He hadn't stepped foot in that place for over 20 years. It was where he had spent the first 10 years of his life, waiting, hoping, believing someone would come for him. No one ever did. Until the day a wealthy businessman, his mentor, his so-called father figure, plucked him from obscurity and shaped him into the ruthless billionaire he was today. But why would Aelith lead him back here? How could she even know? The orphanage's last secret Raventon stood abandoned, the old stone building covered in vines, windows broken, the front gate rusted. Arjun stepped through the entrance, the wooden door creaking. Dust clung to the air, but the moment he entered, he knew he wasn't alone. Alith stood in the center of the room, her hands folded in front of her. She had been waiting. "How did you know about this place?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Alith met his gaze with that same unsettling calm. "Because this is where it all started, Arjun. This is where we first met." His blood ran cold. "What?" Alith exhaled, taking a slow step toward him. "You don't remember, do you?" "But I do. I remember everything." Arjun's mind raced. This wasn't possible. "You're lying," he said. "I don't know you. We've never met before." Alith tilted her head. "Haven't we?" She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out something small, a photograph. She held it out to him. Arjun took it hesitantly. His breath caught. It was an old, faded picture. Of him. At 6 years old. Standing beside a little girl. A girl with familiar dark eyes. Alith's eyes. Buried truths. Arjun's fingers tightened around the photograph. How was this possible? "You were here?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Alith nodded. "For 3 years. We were both here. Until you left, and I was forgotten." Arjun's heart pounded. Why didn't he remember? Then, something deeper clicked in his mind. A memory. A buried whisper from his childhood. A promise. "I'll come back for you. I swear." His own voice. A childish vow. But he never had. He had left her behind. And yet, she was here. Alive. Watching. Waiting. Arjun staggered back, his world spinning. "This doesn't make sense. You were declared dead." "The records, they were erased," Alith said simply. "By who?" She looked at him, her gaze darkening. "By the same people who made you who you are today." The shadow behind it all. Arjun's stomach twisted. He had always known his life was carefully designed. His rise to power wasn't just luck, it had been orchestrated. But what if there was more to the story? What if his past, his real past, had been buried for a reason? And Alith? Was she here to reveal the truth? Or to destroy everything he had built? The power play. Arjun's breath felt heavy as the cold air of the abandoned orphanage wrapped around him. His past was standing right in front of him, staring him down. Alith. The girl he had forgotten. Or rather, the girl he had been forced to forget. "Who did this?" he demanded, gripping the photograph in his hand. "Who erased you?" Alith's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You already know, Arjun. You just don't want to say it out loud." His jaw clenched. There was only one person who had the power to do something like this. The man who had taken him in. His so-called mentor. The billionaire who had shaped him, trained him, given him the empire he now ruled. Arjun's stomach twisted. He wouldn't have done this without a reason. Alith nodded. No, he wouldn't have. And that's the question you need to be asking. Why? A tense silence stretched between them. Arjun could feel the weight of the past crushing down on him. What had he forgotten? What had been taken from him? And why had Alith returned now? The missing years. Arjun ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. Trying to remember. "I don't understand," he admitted. "If I forgot you, if he made me forget, why do you remember everything?" Alith tilted her head slightly. "Because they only erased one of us." A chill crept down his spine. "What do you mean?" Alith's eyes darkened. They didn't just take me out of your life, Arjun. They made sure you would never come looking for me. They made you forget I ever existed. Arjun's throat tightened. You don't erase a child's memories for no reason, Alith continued. Not unless that child knew something dangerous. Arjun's fingers twitched at his sides. What could I possibly have known at 6 years old? Alith held his gaze. That's exactly what I came back to find out. The pieces start to fit. Arjun's mind was spinning. He had always believed he was in control. That his success, his power, his life had been his own making. But now, it was starting to feel like he had been a pawn in a much bigger game. His mentor had plucked him from obscurity, given him everything, molded him into the man he was. But at what cost? And why? He turned to Alith. If you've known this all along, why didn't you come for me sooner? Alith's expression turned unreadable. Because until now, I didn't have a way back in. Arjun's stomach twisted. Back into what? She took a slow step forward. Back into the world I was never supposed to survive. The first real threat. A sudden noise snapped them both to attention. A footstep. Outside the orphanage. Then another. And another. Arjun's instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed Alith's wrist and pulled her behind him, backing toward the shadows. Whoever was out there wasn't friendly. Alith's voice was low. They found us faster than I thought. Arjun's blood ran cold. Who found us? She looked up at him, her expression dead serious. The same people who took your memories, Arjun. His pulse thundered in his ears. Alith exhaled. It's time you learn the truth. But first, we need to survive the night. The ultimate twist. Arjun's pulse hammered in his ears. Outside the orphanage, the footsteps stopped. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Whoever was out there wasn't making a move. But they didn't have to. The message was clear, they had been found. Alith stood next to him, her body still, her breathing slow. Too calm. You expected this, Arjun whispered. Alith's gaze remained on the door. I knew it was only a matter of time. Who are they? Alith turned her eyes to him. The same people who raised you. The ones who erased me. A sharp chill ran down Arjun's spine. His mentor. The man who had built him, who had trained him to be ruthless, efficient, and powerful. The man who had shaped his entire life. Was now trying to bury the past before it could destroy everything. A trap or a test? Alith took a step forward. We can't stay here. They won't come in unless they have to. They don't need to, they're waiting for us to make the first move. Arjun's mind raced. Why wait? If they were here to silence him, why weren't they making a move? Then, the realization hit him like a brick. This isn't a hunt, he murmured. It's a test. Alith nodded. They want to see what you'll do. If you'll run. If you'll fight. Or if you'll go back to playing their game. Arjun clenched his jaw. He hated being controlled. Every instinct screamed at him to walk out there and take back control. But Alith placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. Not yet. She pulled something from her pocket, a small device, no bigger than a coin. She pressed a button, and a holographic screen flickered to life. Surveillance footage. Arjun's breath caught. It was his office. And inside, sitting in his chair, inside his home, was his mentor. Watching. Waiting. As if this entire thing had been orchestrated from the very beginning. Arjun's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about Alith. It was about him, too. His entire life, his power, his money, his empire, had always belonged to someone else. Now, they were watching to see if he was still the man they created. Or if he was something else. Something dangerous. The final decision. Arjun's fingers curled into fists. He had spent his life believing he was the one in control. But the truth was he had been following orders without even realizing it. They had shaped him. Trained him. And now, they wanted to see if he would obey them one last time. Or if he would finally break free. Alith turned to him, her voice calm but firm. It's time to choose, Arjun. He exhaled slowly. And made his decision. The final clue. Arjun stood in the shadows of the orphanage, the weight of his past crushing down on him. His entire life had been a lie. Every business deal, every success, every carefully calculated decision, all guided by unseen hands. His mentor, the man he had trusted like a father, had never given him control. He had only given him the illusion of it. And now, those same hands were watching. Waiting. Would Arjun fall back in line? Or would he finally break free? Alith was watching him too, her expression unreadable. She had known all along. And she had come back not just to reveal the truth, but to see what he would do with it. Arjun took a slow breath. Then, without hesitation, he stepped out of the orphanage. Straight into the open. The confrontation. The moment his feet hit the cracked pavement, figures emerged from the darkness. Men in suits. His mentor's men. Arjun's heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. He recognized the man standing in the center, Jonathan Pierce. His mentor's right-hand man. Pierce tilted his head. You've caused quite a stir, Arjun. Arjun met his gaze coldly. So have you. Pierce exhaled, shaking his head. You weren't supposed to come here. You weren't supposed to remember. Arjun's jaw clenched. And yet, here I am. Alith stepped forward beside him. He deserves to know the truth, Jonathan. No more lies. No more games. Pierce's lips pressed together. This isn't about what he deserves. It's about what's at stake. Arjun narrowed his eyes. Then tell me. What's at stake? Pierce exhaled. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, everything. The truth revealed. Pierce's eyes darkened. Your mentor never chose you randomly, Arjun. You were always meant to be something more. Something bigger. But there was a problem. He glanced at Alith. Her. Arjun's pulse pounded. Pierce continued. You and Alith were raised together, trained together. You were supposed to be the perfect successors. But the problem was, you cared too much. You made a promise to her. A promise that would have ruined everything. Arjun's breath hitched. I'll come back for you. I swear. A promise he had buried. A promise they had erased. Pierce sighed. We couldn't let you remember, Arjun. If you had, you would have walked away from all of this. And we couldn't allow that. Arjun's hands curled into fists. His entire life, his decisions, his choices, had been manipulated from the start. And Alith? She had been the one piece of the puzzle they couldn't control. Alith's voice was quiet but firm. But you made a mistake. You let me survive. Pierce looked at her, then back at Arjun. You have two choices, he said. You can walk away right now, pretend this never happened, and continue living the life you were meant to lead. He paused. Or you can fight back. And destroy everything we built for you. Arjun's chest tightened. This was it. His final choice. The life lesson. Arjun stood motionless, the weight of his past and present crushing down on him. For the first time in his life, he was truly at a crossroads. He had built his empire through relentless ambition, through following the path laid out for him. But now, he saw the truth. it was never his path to begin with. They had chosen him, molded him, erased pieces of him to keep him obedient. And Aelith? She had been the one thread they couldn't pull from his story. Now, Jonathan Pierce, the man who had enforced his mentor's will, was giving him one last choice. Forget this ever happened. Or burn it all down. Arjun met Aelith's gaze. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He had already made his decision. Breaking the chains, Arjun turned back to Pierce, his expression unreadable. I appreciate the offer, he said, voice calm. Pierce exhaled, relief flashing in his eyes. But I'm afraid I have my own plans. Before Pierce could react, Arjun moved. With a single fluid motion, he grabbed Aelith's wrist and sprinted. Straight into the dark. Straight into the unknown. Pierce shouted behind them, orders being given, men scrambling, but it was too late. Because Arjun was no longer their puppet. A new future they ran until the city swallowed them. Until the sounds of pursuit faded. Until Arjun finally turned to Aelith, his breath heavy but steady. So what now? He asked. Aelith gave him that knowing smile again. That depends. On what? She took a step closer, tilting her head. On whether you want to rebuild, or destroy. Arjun exhaled. For years, he had played their game. Lived in their world. Been the person they wanted him to be. But now? Now, he was free. And freedom? It was terrifying. It was powerful. A slow smirk spread across his lips. Let's find out. Aelith smiled back. Together, they walked into the night. Leaving behind the empire that never truly belonged to him. And heading toward the one thing he had never had before. A life of his own. The lesson Arjun had spent his life believing he was in control. That he had built his success, that he had carved out his destiny. But in the end, he had been living a lie. His real choice hadn't been about wealth, power, or revenge. It had been about freedom. Sometimes, the greatest power isn't in what you build, but in what you choose to walk away from. And for the first time in his life, Arjun had finally chosen himself.